Too Many Names by Pablo Neruda and All the King's Horses by Kurt Vonnegut are separated by time and space. However, they share a common bond. Both the poem and the short story focus on reducing people to an arbitrary number or a random name. When humans are reduced to nothing but a number or a name, not only do they lose their individuality, they are stripped of their lives and identity. Both Too Many Names by Pablo Neruda and All the King's Horses by Kurt Vonnegut focus on the global issue of culture, identity, and community by emphasizing that the reduction of a person to a number or a name leads to a loss of individuality. Too Many Names by Pablo Neruda centralizes around the idea that a name cannot and does not define a person. He believes that when people become part of a larger community, they lose their sense of individuality in a quest for the pleasures or goods of this world. Instead of the names that this world gives us, Neruda argues that as people change, their names and individuality should change. In lines 24 through 27, Neruda uses the device of the rhetorical question to emphasize the ever-changing state of the human spirit. When I sleep every night, what am I called or not called? And when I wake, who am I if I was not while I slept? These questions reveal the belief that people's names should change when they change. Instead, a person is defined only by an arbitrary name given to them at one moment in time. If that person is only defined by one moment in time, they lose their ability to change and grow and thus lose their individuality. Neruda argues that names even have the power to make us less unique. Lines 9 and 10, all of us are dust or sand, all of us are rain under rain, uses paradoxically opposed imagery to emphasize Neruda's belief that no one is truly unique. No one's name actually belongs to them, and in the end, we receive the same name of death. We just borrow our names for the time that we're alive, but they don't speak to who we are. They give us no character and are only a temporary label until we take the final label of dead. In giving everyone their own names, we don't emphasize the worth of the individual, but instead place emphasis on the enormous population of the world. The penultimate stanza, lines 28 through 36, contains the anaphora "with so many." The anaphora highlights the idea that the names do not describe the individual, but rather allow for a total population count of the whole world. In particular, line 32 contains the phrase "with so many faltering names." This emphasis on the word faltering reveals that our names do not define us, as they are unsteady and subject to change. The impression of a name is ever-changing as well. If an individual knows a particularly bad person with a certain name, anyone else they meet with that name will automatically become tarnished in their eyes. The meaning of names change from person to person, and they're truly faltering whispers. They do not define a person, but rather give an artificial label for a person joining the race of the world. Similarly to Neruda's idea that a name strips a person of their individuality, Kurt Vonnegut uses the short story All the King's Horses to illustrate that in war, people are reduced to numbers and machines and thus lose their individuality. Throughout the story as a whole, the idea of reducing soldiers' lives to mere numbers on a page strikes the reader as a cold and unforgiving reality of war. Out of the chosen 40-line excerpt, lines 5 through 7 state, "Now he recognized the eerie calm, an old wartime friend, that left only the cold machinery of his wits and senses alive. It was the narcotic of generalship. It was the essence of war." The personification of Colonel Kelly's mechanical mindset reveals that he's been reduced to nothing but a machine. His humanity is stripped away, leaving him as nothing but a machine that takes orders, and machines are classified by numbers. His classification as machine leaves him without humanity and thus without individuality and identity. He is in essence a shell of a man with no soul behind. Vonnegut also uses the device of foreshadowing to reveal a sense of foreboding about losing one's identity. Lines 19 through 21 out of the 40-line excerpt say, "As Colonel Kelly can tell you, a chess game can very rarely be won, any more than a battle can be won, without sacrifices." The foreshadowing of the need for sacrifices not only emphasizes the desperate situation of the American soldiers, but reveals that losing one's identity is not only a sacrifice of life, but a sacrifice of one's very soul. When people think of sacrifices, they often think in the black and white terms of life and death. However, the sacrifice of the loss of one's identity kills a person's individuality long before their physical body dies. Pai Ying's mention of sacrifices in war reduces the soldiers of any war to mere numbers and strips them of their individuality. This reduction to a number causes the soldier not to be seen as a person, but as a figure on a page that determines the tide of battle. The numbers have no soul and thus cannot be considered a unique and whole person. Lines 37 through 40, he found himself thinking of the lieutenant in those terms. No longer human, but a piece capable of moving diagonally across the board. Capable, when attacking with the queen, of terrible damage. Contained imagery which reduced the lieutenant to a piece on a chessboard. The reduction of the lieutenant's identity to a game piece reveals that when a person is reduced to a label, they cease to be a person and are instead a pawn manipulated in a game. Vonnegut comments on the reduction of soldiers to numbers in war by reducing the soldiers to disposable chess pieces. However, the reduction of people to an arbitrary label extends far beyond the turmoil of war. Just as Neruda commented on the fluctuating nature of a person needing a fluctuating name, Vonnegut emphasizes that a number cannot define a person any more than one label can define a person. However, when people are assigned to labels, their dignity and identity is inherently stripped away. So in conclusion, Too Many Names by Pablo Neruda and All the King's Horses by Kurt Vonnegut reveal that reducing a person to a label removes their sense of individuality and strips them of their identity. Although they wrote over 50 years ago, their words and message still ring true today. Labels such as gender, age, and race strive to define people as single characteristics and remove their identity. This serves as a warning for society that reducing people to a single trait kills individuality and tarnishes the world's sense of community.